Hi everyone, my name is Apuraj Garakapati. Welcome to my YouTube channel Amazing Apai. Her thoughts. As she remembered Theo's actions over the years, she realized he had never truly changed from the boy she knew as a child. Despite her injuries, she decided she wanted to help him this time. Meanwhile, the hostages continued suffering under Action's control. Theo's companions were being beaten mercilessly, while Action stood over them like a tyrant. He was fully prepared to execute them for the slightest provocation. Once again, telepathic instructions from the proctors reminded him not to create unnecessary complications. Annoyed, Action reluctantly lowered his blade and waited. He knew that 4 high-ranking swordsmen affiliated with the proctors had already been dispatched to eliminate Theo in secret. His uncle had repeatedly told him that he was not strong enough to defeat Theo on his own, a fact Action absolutely hated hearing. He viewed Theo as little more than an insect and could not tolerate the idea that others considered him a threat. Eventually, the person everyone had been waiting for finally appeared. Theo emerged from the snowy wilderness covered in blood from countless battles. He looked less like a participant and more like a warrior returning from war. His sharp eyes immediately took in the situation. He saw his injured companions scattered around the camp. He saw the men responsible for their suffering. Finally, his gaze settled on Action. The moment he looked at his wounded friends, his grip tightened around his weapon. Action instinctively reached for his sword, eager to begin their battle. However, the telepathic voice immediately ordered him to stay where he was. Following those instructions, Action reluctantly released his weapon. Instead, he attempted negotiation. He calmly told Theo that if he revealed everything he knew about the relics, his friends would be spared. Rather than showing concern, Theo responded with a question that completely caught Action off guard. He asked whether Action was afraid of him. Theo's words were entirely deliberate. He understood Action's personality better than almost anyone. Rather than negotiating, he began openly mocking him. Theo called him a coward who needed hostages, allies, and schemes just to avoid a straightforward confrontation. He accused him of hiding behind others because he was terrified of suffering a humiliating defeat. Action's blood immediately began boiling. Instead of stopping, Theo continued pushing. He claimed that all the men surrounding Action existed solely to protect his fragile pride. The hostage situation itself was proof of weakness. According to Theo, a true member of the Four Hounds would never resort to such tactics. He challenged Action directly, asking whether he intended to behave like a real Ragnar or continue hiding behind others. Every word struck exactly where Theo intended. Action's rage grew with each insult. Finally, Theo proposed conditions for a duel. If he lost, he would surrender both his life and any information he possessed regarding the relics. If he won, Action would release all the hostages and allow them to leave. By that point, Action had completely lost control of himself. He arrogantly laughed and reminded Theo of his place within the clan. The telepathic voice desperately tried to intervene, warning him not to fall for the provocation. The observers could clearly see that Theo was manipulating him. Unfortunately, Action's pride would not allow him to back down. Ignoring every warning, he accepted the challenge exactly as Theo had planned. The hidden proctors immediately realized the situation was slipping out of control. Their original plan had never involved a fair duel. They quietly prepared to intervene if Action found himself facing defeat. Before the battle began, Action ordered his followers not to interfere and instructed them not to harm the hostages. If they were going to fight, they would do so according to Ragnar tradition. The duel began with Theo launching the first attack. The opening exchange immediately surprised Action. Soon, the battlefield erupted into a fierce clash between 2 elite swordsmen. Action continued looking down on Theo, unleashing heavy attacks while trying to overwhelm him with raw force. Determined to demonstrate the difference between them, he unleashed Heaven Dragon Shout. The sheer power behind the technique was enough to make even Theo cautious. However, rather than retreating, Theo responded with a fully charged Triple Dragon's Claw. The attack sliced through Action's technique and destroyed it completely. For the first time, genuine surprise appeared on Action's face. Standing before him was not the weak Theo he remembered, but someone capable of directly challenging his strongest attacks. Theo immediately returned to the mockery, questioning whether Action was truly qualified to lecture him. Watching from the sidelines, Reincarnated began sweating nervously. Until now, he had doubted the stories surrounding Theo's growth. After witnessing that exchange, he could no longer deny reality. Theo was genuinely powerful. In fact, there was a very real possibility that Action could lose. Fear immediately gripped Orion. He even considered abandoning Action and switching sides while he still had the opportunity. However, he ultimately discarded the idea. The Intelligence Bureau proctors were still watching, and they would almost certainly eliminate Theo regardless of how the duel ended. Choosing caution, Orion ordered his men to scatter and keep their distance. Nobody wanted to get caught in the middle of a battle between monsters. As the duel continued, Action's thoughts drifted toward his past. Since childhood, he had been raised with the expectation that he would one day seize Ragnar's throne. Both his mother and his uncle had invested everything into his success because their own ambitions depended on it. Although he carried the Ragnar name, they had always viewed him as a member of the Trovan family first. Even now, he could not help acknowledging Theo's impressive performance. Charging forward again, he attempted another decisive strike. Unsurprisingly, Theo blocked it with confidence. Everything was unfolding exactly as Theo intended. Far away, news of Theo's reappearance and his confrontation with Action finally reached the council. His supporters were overjoyed to learn that he had survived. His enemies were stunned that the three scoundrels had failed to eliminate him. Ed Trovan himself appeared strangely pleased that Theo was still alive. While nobody fully understood his intentions, he still hoped to extract information about the relics before eliminating Theo. He simply waited for the information to surface before sending high-ranking swordsmen to finish the job. However, new reports regarding the duel between Theo and Action quickly arrived. The moment he learned what was happening, Ed became visibly alarmed. This was not how the plan was supposed to unfold. Back on the battlefield, Theo activated his secret movement technique known as Jester's footwork. The technique dramatically increased his mobility and made him extremely difficult to predict. Action swung repeatedly, but every attack missed. During the exchange, he finally realized how much stronger Theo had become. Narrowing his eyes, Action studied his movements carefully before declaring that Theo was not actually as fast as he appeared. Having identified a pattern, he suddenly hurled his sword directly at Theo's head. The attack instantly triggered a painful memory. In his previous life, Theo had been struck by a similar sword-throwing technique. While distracted, he had suffered a devastating wound from the side. Action smugly explained that even secret techniques followed predictable movement patterns. By understanding the pattern, he could predict exactly where Theo would appear next. Blood dripped from the blade as it reached its target. To Action's shock, Theo survived by catching the sword with his bare hand. At that moment, a crucial mystery from his previous life was finally solved. The sword-throwing technique confirmed the identity of one of the people responsible for his downfall. Action had been among those who betrayed him. He had been one of the individuals involved in the destruction of Rose Palace. Back then, Theo had died without ever learning who his true enemies were. Only after Rendon exposed certain truths did the pieces begin falling into place. Evolent's investigation had already linked Rendon to Camilla Palace. From there, Theo had drawn his own conclusions. The people orchestrating everything belonged to the Trovan faction. Among them, only one person possessed such a distinctive sword-throwing technique: Action Ragnar himself. What had once been suspicion was now undeniable proof. Consumed by fury, Theo gripped the sword and crushed it with his bare hand. As the broken pieces fell away, one question continued burning in his mind. Why were they so desperate to kill him that they would go to such extreme lengths? The sight of Theo crushing the sword with his bare hand. Before we move ahead, please take a second to like on this video. A like tells me that you enjoyed this topic. Your support helps Amazing Pie grow naturally. Left Action completely speechless. Unfortunately for everyone who had plotted against him, Theo was no longer the powerless person from his previous life. This time, he was determined to protect both himself and the people precious to him. Without hesitation, Theo hurled the broken blade toward Action. However, the attack was easily avoided. Action mocked him, ridiculing both his aim and his pathetic attempt to imitate the sword-throwing technique. Yet while he was speaking, something changed. A terrifying wave of bloodlust and killing intent erupted from Theo's body. The overwhelming pressure caused the surrounding mana to surge violently. Action's eyes widened in shock as he finally realized the truth. Theo had been hiding a tremendous amount of strength all along. Before he could fully react, Theo vanished from sight. In the blink of an eye, he reappeared directly beneath Action and unleashed a devastating strike. The force behind the attack sent Action stumbling backward. For the first time in their confrontation, Action found himself on the defensive. Theo relentlessly pressed the attack, eventually managing to graze Action's face. With a precise cut, wearing a confident smirk, Theo continued provoking him, asking how much longer he intended to hold back his true strength. Suddenly, Action retaliated. He grabbed Theo's arm and answered with a slash of his own, leaving a wound across Theo's face. The battle had reached a point where neither side held a clear advantage. They were fighting on equal footing. Theo disappeared once more, using his speed to create another opening. A powerful slash knocked Action's weapon away entirely, leaving him defenseless. Seizing the opportunity, Theo prepared a fatal thrust aimed directly at his opponent's stomach. At that distance, even Action should not have been able to evade the attack. Elsewhere, Remington continued tracking the blood trail left behind by the captors. Upon closer examination, he realized the marks were not from a battle, but from injured people being dragged across the snow. The situation immediately made him think of Action, although the idea seemed strange. Action already held first place. Logically, there should have been no reason for him to act so recklessly. However, Remington quickly pieced together the truth. The entire operation had been designed to hunt Theo during the second stage of the examination. Hulkus was furious after hearing the conclusion. To him, using hostages and ambushes was the behavior of a coward. Erica, on the other hand, showed little surprise. She coldly remarked that such behavior was perfectly normal during Ragnar's awakening ceremony. Remington acknowledged that reality, but admitted it was exactly why he despised the Ragnar way. Too many people worshipped strength and ignored morality, crossing any line necessary to achieve victory. Erica warned him to watch his words, but Remington could not care less. Saving his friends was more important. He stated that Theo would have done the same thing in his position. Determined to help, Remington requested their assistance. Hulkus immediately agreed. Erica initially refused, claiming she had only come to meet Theo and had no interest in risking herself for weak people. Her brother immediately called her out for being heartless. Remington then pointed out that helping Theo now would likely benefit her later. Eventually, the three warriors continued moving toward the hostages' location. Unfortunately, they were intercepted before reaching their destination. Members of the Scaled Dragon Society suddenly appeared and blocked their path. Orion Gardner was particularly annoyed to see the white-haired Remington associating with people like Hulkus. Hulkus immediately exploded in anger and began cursing Orion. Remington calmly warned him to step aside and avoid unnecessary conflict. Orion refused, with no other option remaining. Swords were drawn. The three allies charged forward and began fighting the members of the Scaled Dragon Society. Back at the hostage camp, Theo's thrown blade finally revealed its true purpose. It had never been intended to kill Action. Instead, the broken weapon landed right beside the captured members of Training Ground Number 4. It was a tool for escape. One of the prisoners quickly realized this and dragged the blade closer. Sybil immediately began working at the ropes, binding him, desperately trying to free himself and the others. Meanwhile, Theo's duel took a sudden turn, just as he was about to land the decisive blow. A new figure intervened. A high-ranking swordsman suddenly appeared between the two combatants and blocked the attack. The newcomer was Liam Troven, fully aware that interfering violated the rules. Liam openly stated that he was prepared to accept whatever punishment followed. Ignoring the consequences, he launched an aggressive assault against Theo. The remaining proctors praised Theo's impressive performance before returning his weapon to him. Interestingly, Action did not seem angry about the interruption. Instead, he looked disappointed. Liam's swordsmanship immediately placed tremendous pressure on Theo. His attacks were faster, sharper, and far more refined than Action's. Even so, Theo managed to keep up surprisingly well. Liam launched a powerful thrust that Theo successfully blocked. During the exchange, the high-ranking swordsman admitted to himself that Theo's defensive abilities were extraordinary. Surviving against both Action and a veteran like himself was no small feat. Nevertheless, Liam understood that Theo's skill still fell short of his own. There were no neutral proctors nearby to witness what happened next, making this the perfect opportunity to eliminate Theo permanently. For the sake of the Trovan faction, Liam decided to finish him with a decisive aerial strike. However, the outcome was not what anyone expected. The person who ended up impaled was not Theo. In a shocking twist, Liam was suddenly stabbed from behind. The attacker was none other than Action himself. Everyone froze in disbelief. Action coldly reminded the others that he had issued a warning at the beginning of the duel. Nobody was supposed to interfere. The situation immediately descended into chaos. The other swordsmen demanded an explanation, unable to understand why Action had attacked one of his own allies. Action furiously responded that their intervention implied he was incapable of winning on his own. To him, that was an insult he could not tolerate. Theo could only stare in disbelief. Action had gone completely insane. At the same time, Action finally acknowledged Theo's strength as a Ragnar warrior. Ever since childhood, his uncle had filled his head with dreams of glory, convincing him that he was destined to sit on the Ragnar throne. Action openly admitted that Theo had become strong, yet in his mind, he still remained superior. He proclaimed himself the future strongest warrior of Ragnar, and declared that there was no possible future where he lost this battle. Anyone who stood between him and the throne would be cut down. With that declaration, he charged forward once again. Theo effortlessly avoided the attack by launching himself into the air. A counterattack immediately followed, catching Action completely off guard. Meanwhile, Liam was revealed to still be alive, though barely. Gravely wounded, he desperately ordered his subordinates to help Action. According to him, they needed to kill Theo immediately while they still had a chance. The other high-ranking swordsman hesitated. After all, interfering had already led to Liam's downfall. Liam ignored their concerns and repeated the order. In his eyes, if Action died here, they were all doomed. As the battle continued, Action found himself being pushed further and further back. He could hardly believe what was happening. The person he had always mocked as a worm, an insect, and an idiot was completely outclassing him. Memories of his uncle's teachings resurfaced. Ed Trovan had always warned him that Ragnar was a world of unpredictable outcomes where impossible situations could suddenly reverse themselves. Action had never taken those words seriously. Now, he was experiencing their meaning firsthand. Still, his pride refused to accept reality. Even while suffering severe injuries, he continued attacking recklessly. His movements became increasingly Before we move ahead, please take a second to share on this video. Sharing helps this video reach friends who may also enjoy anime, gaming, travel, cricket, chess, career basics, or personal stories. Your support helps Amazing Abhai grow naturally. Desperate as he ranted about destiny, fate, and his right to rule, Theo listened to those words with complete indifference. To him, grand ambitions meant nothing. Ambition had been responsible for the deaths of countless people he cared about in his previous life. He had no interest in discussing destiny with a man like Action. If Action refused to surrender, then Theo would force him to submit. Drawing upon every ounce of his strength, Theo unleashed his power. A magnificent blue dragon materialized around him as mana surged violently across the battlefield. For the final time, he invoked Triple Dragon's Claw. His determination was absolute. He declared his intention to become strong enough to destroy anyone who stood in his path. The attack struck with overwhelming force. Theo's blade pierced straight through Action. The impact shattered his defenses and ripped through his body. For a brief moment, everything seemed to freeze. Then, the destruction fully unfolded. When the smoke finally cleared, a corpse collapsed onto the ground. Action's body fell separately from his severed head. The detached head tumbled through the air before crashing into the earth below. Blood stained the battlefield, marking the end of the conflict. There was nothing anyone could do anymore. The duel was over. Theo Ragnar stood victorious after finally exacting a measure of revenge against one of the people responsible for his tragic past. Nearby, Liam Trovan stared in disbelief at the gruesome sight. The young master he had tried so desperately to protect was dead. In the end, it was a fitting conclusion for a man whose arrogance had blinded him until the very last moment. Liam ordered his remaining men to kill Theo at all costs, hoping to at least get some revenge. The Trovan family's protectors, all high-ranking swordsmen, quickly snapped out of their shock and rushed forward. Theo remained standing, a bitter yet satisfied smile on his face. The situation was honestly terrible. Even if he had been at full strength, surviving a coordinated assault from 4 senior proctors would have been nearly impossible. But now, after killing Action, his stamina was completely drained and his mana reserves were bone dry. At this point, all Theo could do was stall for a little longer with whatever strength he had left. Thankfully, according to his calculations, reinforcements should arrive any moment, and sure enough, just as the proctors closed in for their final attack, Remington, Narcelo, and the Lenka siblings finally appeared. The 3 instantly positioned themselves around Theo, forming a solid wall of defense against the proctors. To Remington, protecting a comrade in danger was simply common sense. Seeing the dependable Silver Lion standing before him, Theo finally felt a wave of relief. Erika Lenka secretly glanced at Theo and was pleasantly surprised that the famous rising star was also incredibly handsome. Meanwhile, Hulkus Lenka was absolutely hyped to meet someone strong enough to kill Action and still stand against multiple elite swordsmen. Inspired by the arrival of reinforcements, Sybil forced his battered body back onto his feet and joined the fight once more alongside his young master. Remington then pointed his sword at the corrupt proctors and openly listed every one of their crimes. Interfering with a sacred tradition was an unforgivable offense, and he had no problem personally passing judgment on these scumbags. With even more witnesses now present, the situation became even messier. The proctors instinctively turned toward Liam Troyven, waiting for their leader's next move. Realistically, they were doomed no matter what they chose. Their original mission had been to uncover information about the Rose Palace's artifacts, but they had failed completely. They couldn't eliminate Theo, the biggest obstacle in their plans, and to make matters worse, the young master had died under their watch. With countless witnesses and overwhelming evidence exposing their actions, the entire operation was basically finished. Even so, the proctors still believed Sir Liam would somehow find a way out. Liam eventually reached a simple conclusion. When things become too complicated, take the simplest route, kill everyone. He still had a hidden trump card: monster marbles. If every candidate at the site died, they could simply claim that an abnormal monster outbreak had wiped everyone out. Their fail, torture, and assassination plot could then be disguised as a tragic accident, erasing all traces of the Troyven family's involvement. Driven by desperation, Liam threw 25 high-grade monster marbles onto the ground. If they staged everything perfectly, there was still a slim chance of salvaging the situation. Even at the very end, the proctors chose to place their family's interests above everything else. However, before the marbles could even transform, Liam suddenly felt an intense pain explode through his stomach. For the second time that night, the poor guy got stabbed from behind. This time, the blade belonged to Selforded Gardner, the White Dragon Clan supervisor. Beside him stood another supervisor, Aaron Bacchus. At the same time, reinforcements from the White Dragon Clan, Plumblossom Palace and Daffodil Palace arrived as well, including Natasha Copel and Sally Gardner. Liam, that crafty bastard, finally collapsed onto the cold ground. Selford immediately ordered the remaining traitors to surrender unless they wanted to die on the spot. The Troyven proctors had nowhere left to run. Behind them stood Theo Ragnar, the clan's brightest young talent, while seasoned veteran supervisors blocked the path ahead. The moment Theo realized everyone was finally safe, the last bit of strength holding him up disappeared. As he collapsed, Ragnar, the very woman who had warned him not to go earlier, caught him before he hit the ground, before losing consciousness completely. Theo quietly thanked her for the warning. As the traitorous proctors were dragged away in chains, Remington immediately dropped his heroic facade and rushed over to Theo with genuine concern. The Lenka siblings quickly joined in. Erika wanted to make sure Theo remembered her, while Hulkus was already eager to arrange another duel. Soon after, the boys from Training Ground 4 came running over as well, sincerely thanking their young master. Every single one of them was crying uncontrollably, feeling the overwhelming gratitude, loyalty, and concern from his people. Theo Ragnar smiled. This was the exact kind of strength he had always longed for. Out of everyone, Race seemed to understand his true nature the best. As his consciousness slowly faded away, Theo made one final request. He only wanted enough bells to secure first place. Shortly after that, traitorous proctors were arrested. News of the incident reached Ragnar headquarters. Ed Troyvan couldn't believe what he was hearing. The entire round table of Ragnar's top figures fell silent as the messenger repeated the report. The news of Action Ragnar's death struck the room like a bolt of lightning, and when the Sky Dragon learned that his nephew had died during a test that had secretly been arranged to assassinate another fledgling, he nearly lost control on the spot. Meanwhile, the announcement ceremony for the second round of the blooming ceremony finally began. The survivors gathered at the starting point, and it was obvious from their faces just how brutal the test had been. Everyone looked exhausted and beaten up. Stepping forward to address the candidates, an elderly man first praised them for enduring such a grueling trial. The one officially declaring the end of the ceremony was none other than one of the legendary 9 dragons, the Zenith Dragon, Theo Ragnar. The moment everyone recognized him, the entire new generation was left completely starstruck. After all, every member of the Ragnar family knew who the Zenith Dragon was. The old monster rarely even appeared at formal events, so seeing him in person felt unreal. Pharaoh then announced the results. Out of the 87 participants, only 45 had passed. While that number sounded low at first, it was actually above the average survival rate. In fact, it was proof of just how ridiculously talented this year's batch was. Some even believed this could become the greatest generation in Ragnar history, and even among such an insanely talented group, one candidate had shined brighter than everyone else. The old man also reminded everyone that simply passing the second round automatically promoted them from apprentice status to entry-level members. At this point, they had every right to be proud. Those who passed were now officially qualified to work as Ragnar inspectors under various factions. To make things even more exciting, the Zenith Dragon moved on to announcing the rankings. Unsurprisingly, first place belonged to Theo Ragnar, with an absurd total of 1,121 points. Nobody could believe it. The guy who had been sitting at 0 points until the final moments had somehow climbed all the way to first place. But considering he had literally taken Action's head, it suddenly made perfect sense. Remington Narcevo secured second place with 926 points, while Erika Lenka claimed third with 843 points. Ray Ragnar ranked fourth with 789 points, and Hulkus barely managed to grab 5th place. Pharaoh continued announcing the rankings until he reached the 45th and final passing spot. These top-performing candidates were practically guaranteed prestigious positions within the clan. However, the blooming ceremony wasn't over just yet. There was still a hidden third round, one reserved only for the absolute elite. When Pharaoh asked those who had collected enough bells to participate in the secret ceremony to raise their hands, only the usual monsters responded. In the end, just 4 people had qualified for the final trial. The hidden portion of the ceremony revolved around the quality breathing method. By gathering enough bells, participants gained access to ancient inscriptions hidden within them. But simply reading the words wasn't enough. Before we move ahead, please take a second to like on this video. A like tells me that you enjoyed this topic. Your support helps Amazing Apai grow naturally. Understanding those cryptic messages required exceptional insight and talent. Those capable of comprehending the teachings could integrate those visions into their own fighting style and earn the right to participate in the final assessment. In Theo's previous life, he had been lucky enough to obtain a single bell, but back then, he couldn't understand even a single word hidden inside it. Things were different now, thanks to hatchling synchronization, an ability that allowed him to perceive the thoughts and essence of things. Theo could interpret the encrypted messages as vivid images and experiences inside his mind. He witnessed countless scenes of legendary heroes and ancient warriors training and perfecting their craft. Those visions gave him a deep understanding of the hidden truths in an incredibly short amount of time. Normally, it was rare for even one person to qualify for the final trial, yet this year there were 4. As far as Theo remembered, neither Ray nor Remington had originally managed to comprehend the quality breathing method during the ceremony. It seemed that Theo's actions had altered their destinies as well. Once the icy platform opened, Pharaoh invited the top 4 to demonstrate what they had learned. Since he ranked first, Theo Ragnar stepped forward first. With action gone, Theo knew the future would change drastically from now on, but instead of worrying about what lay ahead, he felt calm and completely at peace. For the first time, he possessed all the tools necessary to build a better future. As Theo walked toward the center of the field, sparks began crackling around his feet. In seconds, those tiny sparks transformed into roaring thunder. After examining countless bells, Theo had finally discovered and synchronized with his natural attribute, thunder. To demonstrate his comprehension, he activated the first stage, imbuing his mana with the thunder attribute. Then came the second stage, expression, where he manifested that thunderous mana into reality. Seeing Theo standing there like the literal god of thunder sent the boys from training ground 4 into a frenzy. Normally, reaching this level alone would already earn someone the title of genius, but Theo Ragnar was on an entirely different level. There wasn't even a word capable of describing his talent. Using the dragon heart beating inside his chest, Theo advanced to the third stage of comprehension, control, displaying absolute mastery over his thunder attribute. Erika Lanko was practically drooling as she watched the strongest mana for her generation dominate the stage, while Holkus looked like a kid witnessing a live dragon ball battle. Even the Zenith dragon admitted that he had never expected such an advanced level of understanding in someone so young. Everyone assumed this would be the end, since control was already considered the ceiling for most prodigies, but Theo wasn't done stealing the spotlight. After perfectly demonstrating control, Theo pushed his thunder mana to an even higher realm. The entire field was suddenly illuminated by a brilliant golden yellow light, making it seem as though a super attack was about to erupt. Opening his eyes sharply, Theo drew his sword as wild lightning exploded around him. With a single swing, he unleashed a ranged lightning slash. Finally, he had obtained a long-range attack, but the attack didn't stop there. The lightning slash gained a life of its own, taking the shape of a ferocious thunder dragon, charging across the battlefield. This was the fourth stage of comprehension expansion. The moment everyone witnessed it, complete silence fell over the audience. Every single person stood there with their jaws hanging open. Theo then directed the thunder dragon straight toward Theo Ragnar himself. Naturally, the old man merely chuckled. Rather than feeling offended, he was delighted to witness a talent capable of reaching expansion at such an age. Before the thunder dragon could strike, Theo casually raised a hand and summoned tiny droplets of water from thin air. Those seemingly harmless droplets compressed themselves to an unbelievable degree and effortlessly blocked the massive thunder dragon. The Zenith dragon wasn't angry that Theo dared attack him. If anything, he was thrilled to have discovered such an extraordinary gem. The crowd was completely speechless. Was this monster really someone from their own generation? Clearly in a much better mood after Theo's performance, Theo rewarded him with an additional 1,000 points. Of course, Theo had already anticipated the old man's tendency to favor exceptional talents and had intentionally planned this stunt. With that, throne was usually enough to dominate an entire generation, yet Theo had more than doubled that. His achievement could only be compared to the legendary Lord Thorkel himself. Inspired by Theo's performance, Theo then invited the remaining candidates to demonstrate their abilities. Remington, Narsuo, who had synchronized with the water attribute, successfully reached the third stage, control, earning an extra 500 points. Ragnar attained the second stage, expression, perfectly matching her icy personality and gaining 300 additional points with her ice attribute. Likewise, Erika Lenka also reached expression, earning another 300 points while showcasing her fire attribute, which suited her fiery personality perfectly. The Zenith dragon couldn't hide his satisfaction. In most years, even a single candidate crossing the 1,000-point mark would dominate the entire ceremony. This year, however, there were 4 individuals who could have easily claimed first place in any other generation. Still, the gap between first and second place remained absurdly massive. Theo Ragnar simply couldn't be compared to ordinary geniuses. Once the demonstrations ended, everyone except the 4 third-round candidates was dismissed to prepare for the upcoming nomination ceremony scheduled for the following week. Meanwhile, Theo, Remington, Ray, and Erika stayed behind to receive instructions for the next stage of their journey. Suddenly, an overwhelming killing intent erupted from the peak of the snow-covered mountain, instantly blanketing the entire region. The pressure was so terrifying that the top 4 candidates nearly collapsed to their knees on the spot. Even with all the knowledge Theo possessed about the future, he had never heard of anything like this happening before. Standing beside them, with an unusually serious expression, the Zenith Dragon officially announced the beginning of the next stage of their lives. However, Theo wasn't just shocked by the pressure itself. He could feel something incredibly familiar hidden within it. The energy pouring down from the mountain was unmistakable. It belonged to Lodbrok. According to the Zenith Dragon, the final stage of the blooming ceremony was a secret trial reserved only for a select few. The candidates who qualified would have a face-to-face meeting with the family head himself. Nobody knew exactly what happened during this meeting because everything depended entirely on the patriarch's mood. Sometimes, this encounter could even result in a candidate being selected as a future contender in the battle for the clan head position. In fact, every one of the current 5 frontrunners in the succession race had participated in this very trial. Being chosen as a candidate for the throne was considered one of the greatest honors in the Ragnar clan. This meant that Theo Ragnar himself was currently waiting at the summit for this year's top talents, but Theo couldn't stop thinking about the familiar energy. If Lodbrok's power was really coming from the mountain peak, then only one possibility remained. A chilling thought suddenly crossed his mind. Could his father be the one who had taken the ancient dragon's heart? After giving the signal, the Zenith Dragon instructed the top forward to climb the mountain, overcome their fear, and meet the family head. Unfortunately, that was much easier said than done. The pressure crushing them was so immense that none of them could even take a single step forward. Seeing his fellow candidates struggling, Theo quickly shared an idea. Instead of resisting the pressure head-on, they should synchronize their mana with the pressure's wavelength and neutralize it. Remington immediately understood what Theo meant. In theory, if they could create an opposite wave using mana, they could cancel out the hostile force. Essentially, this trial was also testing whether they possessed sufficient control over their mana. Erica, meanwhile, listened to their discussion with complete confusion. She had absolutely no idea what the 2 brainiacs were talking about. Remington enthusiastically began explaining the vibrational properties of mana, but Erica just stared at him as if he were speaking some alien language. Finally, she cut him off and bluntly summarized the solution in the simplest way possible. Just use mana with the opposite properties to counter the pressure. Then she scolded Remington for overcomplicating something so straightforward. While the others continued arguing, Theo had already closed his eyes and focused entirely on finding a solution. Mere seconds later, a thick and powerful aura erupted around him as he successfully neutralized the crushing pressure. When the others asked how he solved the puzzle so quickly, Theo shamelessly declared that such a feat was only natural for the future clan head. His outrageous confidence left the other candidates speechless, while the Zenith Dragon simply maintained his usual unreadable expression. Without waiting for anyone else, Theo dashed straight toward the snowy forest leading to the summit, leaving everyone behind in the dust. Seeing this, the Zenith Dragon warned the remaining candidates to hurry up, because the points for this trial would be awarded based on the order in which they reached the top. Those words immediately lit a fire under everyone. The race had officially begun. Once the last candidate disappeared into the forest, the Zenith Dragon quietly chuckled to himself. Even at his old age, he had never wanted to take a disciple as badly as he wanted Theo. Meanwhile, back at Camellia Palace, a certain elf came charging through the front gates while laughing loudly. It was none. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to Amazing Apai. Subscribing makes sure you do not miss the next video, and it gives me motivation to keep improving the quality of every upload. Thank you for being here, and I will see you in the next one.